Hello everyone. My name is Jacob, and today I want to share my personal journey of mastering English. Like many of you, I once struggled with the language, feeling frustrated, misunderstood, and even doubting if I would ever reach fluency. But through persistence, practice, and the right mindset, I transformed my English skills and changed my life. If you're on this journey too, know that you're not alone. My story proves that no matter where you start, you can achieve fluency. Stick with me, and I'll share my challenges, strategies, and victories to help inspire you to reach your own goals. Before we dive into my journey, make sure to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Learning English is a continuous journey, and I'm here to guide and support you every step of the way. Now, let's get started. I remember the exact moment I realized I had to learn English. It was a cold winter morning, and I was standing in an airport, surrounded by the chatter of people speaking a language I barely understood. I clutched my ticket tightly, trying to decipher the words flashing on the departure board, but they meant nothing to me. A staff member approached me and asked something in English. My heart pounded, my palms grew sweaty, and my mind went completely blank. I felt a wave of panic and embarrassment wash over me. I managed to mutter a few words, but they came out wrong, and the staff member gave me a confused look before moving on. That moment stayed with me. It was as if the world had suddenly grown larger, and I had shrunk into a tiny, insignificant space within it. I knew then that if I didn't learn English, I would always feel like an outsider, always be lost in translation, unable to connect with the vast opportunities that lay beyond my comfort zone. Growing up in a small town, English was just another subject in school, something to memorize and forget after the exams. It was presented to us in a mechanical way, with endless grammar drills and vocabulary lists that seemed disconnected from real-life communication. My teachers emphasized accuracy, ensuring that we could conjugate verbs and identify sentence structures, yet we rarely practiced speaking or listening. We would repeat dialogues from textbooks, but they felt stiff and unnatural, devoid of the rhythm and emotion of a real conversation. English felt distant, almost theoretical, like a puzzle I had no reason to solve. There was no sense of urgency to master it, as everyone around me spoke my native language. But deep inside, I had a curiosity about the world beyond my small town. I often wondered what it would be like to understand the songs on the radio, the movies that were dubbed over, or the conversations tourists had when they visited our area. I just didn't know where to begin, and the fear of making mistakes kept me from trying. But then, one day, my cousin visited from an English-speaking country. He was different, more confident, more articulate. He spoke English effortlessly, cracking jokes, helping my father with a business deal. I watched in awe as he communicated without hesitation, his words flowing smoothly. I could see how people admired him, how doors opened for him simply because he spoke English well. That's when it hit me, English wasn't just a language, it was a key. A key to opportunities, to travel, to connections with people all over the world. For the first time, I felt a deep regret for not taking English seriously earlier. But regret wasn't going to help me. I had to start somewhere. The problem was, I didn't know how. I had no tutor, no native speakers around me, no access to fancy courses. All I had was my determination and the conviction that I needed to change my future. The question was, where do I begin? I realized that immersion was key. Even though I didn't have a traditional learning environment, I could create one for myself. I started by changing my phone and computer settings to English, forcing myself to interact with the language daily. I labeled household items with English words, so I would see and associate them naturally. I carried a small notebook where I jotted down unfamiliar words and reviewed them regularly. At first, it was overwhelming. I struggled with pronunciation, and my writing was filled with mistakes. But instead of letting frustration get the best of me, I made it my mission to learn from each error. I began reading children's books to familiarize myself with simple sentence structures, then gradually moved on to articles and short stories. Watching English movies with subtitles also helped me match spoken words with their written forms, training my brain to process English in real time. I also sought out opportunities to practice speaking, even when I had no conversation partners. I would read aloud, repeat lines from movies, and even talk to myself in the mirror. It felt awkward at first, but over time, these small habits built my confidence. Then, one day, I joined an online language exchange program where I could talk to native English speakers. I was terrified, but I knew that this was the step I needed to take. I scheduled my first call, and despite my nerves, I managed to hold a conversation. It wasn't perfect, but it was real communication. And that, I realized, was more important than flawless grammar or an extensive vocabulary. I started small. I scoured the internet for free resources, watched YouTube tutorials, and downloaded language learning apps. I found simple books and started reading, underlining every word I didn't understand and looking it up in a dictionary. Every night, I wrote down 5 new words in a notebook and tried to use them the next day. I set small goals, learning 10 new words a week, watching a movie with subtitles, and listening to English music to train my ears to the language. As my confidence grew, I began to experiment with different techniques. I listened to English podcasts while commuting, paused videos to repeat phrases out loud, and even wrote summaries of what I had watched or read to reinforce my understanding. I created flashcards to test myself and organized study sessions where I would challenge myself with quizzes. One of the most effective strategies I developed was shadowing, where I mimicked native speakers in real time, trying to match their rhythm and intonation. It felt strange at first, but over time, I noticed my pronunciation improving. I also pushed myself to engage in English-speaking forums and social media groups, where I could write comments, ask questions, and engage in discussions with real people. The more I surrounded myself with English, the more it became second nature. It wasn't just about memorizing words. It was about making English a part of my daily routine, embedding it into my lifestyle in a way that felt natural and effortless. One day, I came across a free language exchange website. It was a global platform where people from different countries practiced speaking with each other in various languages. After weeks of hesitation, I finally signed up and nervously scheduled my first conversation with a stranger from another country. My heart pounded as I waited for the call to start. When the moment came, I stumbled over my introduction, mispronouncing words, hesitating, and feeling self-conscious. But to my relief, my partner was patient, kind, and encouraging. As we continued, I realized that even with mistakes, I was communicating. I was making myself understood, however imperfectly. This experience became a turning point for me. I saw that the fear of making mistakes had held me back for too long. Speaking, even badly, was better than not speaking at all. From that day forward, I embraced every opportunity to speak, whether with online partners, strangers, or even by talking to myself. My confidence grew, and so did my ability to express myself in English. Encouraged by that small success, I kept pushing forward. I made it a rule to think in English whenever possible, replacing my native thoughts with English expressions. I labeled household objects with English words, spoke to myself in the mirror, and even tried shadowing native speakers by repeating their words aloud right after hearing them. With every passing day, English started feeling less like a foreign language and more like a familiar companion. The first step in my journey was listening. I borrowed an old cassette player and started listening to English stories. At first, it was frustrating. The words blurred together, meaning nothing. But I didn't stop. Every day, I listened while eating, while walking, before sleeping. And then, one day, something incredible happened. I was listening to a simple children's story about a lost cat, and suddenly, I understood a whole sentence without translating it in my head. That moment was magical. My brain was starting to adapt. But understanding English and speaking it were two different things. The first time I tried speaking, I mixed up words, mispronounced everything, and felt like a fool. I wanted to give up. I felt embarrassed every time I opened my mouth, fearing the judgment of others. Then, I remembered learning to ride a bicycle. I fell hundreds of times before I got it right. Why should learning English be any different? So, I made a decision. I would speak to myself in English. I described everything around me. The sky is blue. I am drinking coffee. It felt silly, but it worked. I took it a step further and started recording myself speaking. Listening to my own voice was uncomfortable at first, but it helped me identify areas that needed improvement. I also practiced with voice recognition software to check my pronunciation. Every day, I dedicated at least 15 minutes to practicing out loud. To push myself further, I began engaging in self-conversations, where I would play both roles in a dialogue, imagining different scenarios like ordering food at a restaurant or asking for directions. Additionally, I started using tongue twisters and reading out loud to improve my articulation and fluency. Over time, my confidence grew, and I started experimenting with different tones and expressions. I practiced expressing emotions, excitement, sadness, anger, to make my speech sound more natural. Eventually, I even recorded mock presentations and practiced storytelling. The more I spoke, the more natural it felt, and the fear of making mistakes gradually faded away. Speaking in English became an integral part of my daily routine. Then came the real test. One day, a tourist stopped me on the street and asked for directions. My heart pounded, and for a brief moment, I considered pretending I didn't understand. But instead of panicking, I took a deep breath and answered. My sentences weren't perfect, and I hesitated between words, but he nodded and smiled. He understood me. That was the first time I felt a real surge of confidence in my ability to communicate in English. I realized then that making mistakes was not a failure but a stepping stone to progress. Every awkward pause, every mispronounced word was part of my growth. From that moment, I stopped fearing conversations and started embracing them as opportunities to improve. Once I was comfortable speaking, I realized I needed more words. That's when I turned to reading. At first, English books overwhelmed me. They were full of words I didn't know, and I often had to stop mid-sentence to look them up. But then, I found a book called The Little Prince. It was simple, yet full of meaning, and it changed my perspective on reading. Suddenly, reading wasn't just about learning English, it was about discovering new ideas and perspectives. I started reading everything: children's books, short stories, newspapers, blogs, even restaurant menus. I challenged myself to read novels, even if it took me longer than expected. Over time, I realized that different genres exposed me to various sentence structures, styles, and tones. Fiction helped me understand storytelling and informal dialogue, while newspapers introduced me to formal language and current affairs. I also began listening to audiobooks while reading along, which reinforced my comprehension and pronunciation. Additionally, I started exploring different authors and writing styles, from classic literature to contemporary novels, each offering a unique insight into cultural and linguistic nuances. Beyond just books, I found myself diving into English articles, research papers, and opinion pieces. This variety allowed me to familiarize myself with both academic and conversational English. I subscribed to online magazines, read editorials, and participated in online discussions, which challenged me to think critically and express opinions in English. To enhance my retention, I began summarizing everything I read. Whether it was a chapter from a book, a news article, or a blog post, I would write a short summary in my own words. This practice not only improved my writing skills but also helped reinforce new vocabulary and concepts. The more I read, the more words I learned. The more words I learned, the better I spoke. Reading became more than a learning tool, it became an escape, a window into a world I had never explored before, broadening both my language skills and my worldview. I also developed the habit of writing down unfamiliar words and incorporating them into my daily conversations, making sure to use them in different contexts to solidify my understanding. I kept a dedicated vocabulary journal where I wrote not only the word but also its meaning, example sentences, and synonyms. My vocabulary expanded significantly, and I found myself expressing thoughts more clearly and with greater variety. I no longer had to rely on basic phrases. I could articulate my ideas with confidence, using more precise and nuanced language. This newfound ability not only improved my communication, but also deepened my appreciation for the richness of the English language. One of my teachers told me, "If you want to think in English, write in English." So, I started keeping a journal. At first, I wrote short sentences. Today was a good day. I ate rice. But soon, my entries grew longer. I wrote about my dreams, my fears, my thoughts, and the challenges I faced while learning English. I described my daily experiences, practicing how to express my emotions and observations with greater detail. To make my writing more engaging, I began experimenting with different tenses, narrative styles, and rhetorical devices. I wrote letters to imaginary friends, crafted dialogues between fictional characters, and even tried writing personal essays on topics that interested me. I found that by pushing my creative boundaries, I not only improved my ability to think in English but also developed a genuine appreciation for the language itself. As my confidence grew, I started setting writing goals for myself, completing a short story every week, summarizing news articles, and translating my thoughts without relying on my native language. Each new challenge pushed me further, refining my skills and expanding my comfort zone. Over time, I incorporated new vocabulary words and experimented with different sentence structures. I challenged myself to write short stories, essays, and reflections on books I had read in English. I even delved into writing poetry, journaling my thoughts daily, and composing emails and messages in English to immerse myself further. Writing became more than just a practice. It became an outlet for creativity, self-expression, and personal growth. I found that through storytelling, I could explore emotions and perspectives in ways I never had before. As my confidence in writing grew, I noticed a significant improvement in my spoken English as well. The words I had written flowed more naturally in conversations, and I found myself able to construct sentences faster with greater accuracy. My ability to articulate complex thoughts improved, and I could engage in deeper discussions without struggling to find the right words. Writing was no longer just a tool for learning, it became a bridge that connected my thoughts to my voice, making communication effortless and enjoyable. And then, something incredible happened. Writing helped me think in English. I no longer needed to translate in my head. English became natural. My thoughts flowed freely in the language, and I found myself forming sentences without hesitation. It was as if my mind had fully embraced English, allowing me to engage in deeper conversations, express abstract ideas more clearly, and understand nuances I once struggled with. The shift was liberating. I no longer felt like an outsider in the language, but rather someone who belonged within it. I also joined online writing communities where I could receive feedback on my writing. I participated in group discussions, writing challenges, and even collaborated on short stories with fellow learners. Engaging with others helped me learn about different writing styles, idioms, and expressions that made my English sound more fluent. I experimented with poetry, opinion pieces, and creative storytelling, expanding my ability to articulate thoughts in diverse ways. Writing was no longer just practice, it became an enjoyable activity, a creative escape, and a tool that strengthened my connection with the language on a deeper level. To improve my speaking further, I started watching English movies and TV shows. But I didn't just watch them, I actively studied them. I mimicked the actors, repeating their lines with the same intonation and rhythm, copying their accents until they felt natural. I paused scenes, rewound them, and repeated phrases multiple times until I could say them fluently. I remember watching Friends and hearing Joey say, "How you doin'?" I laughed, but I also learned. That was how real people spoke. Soon, I started imitating other characters too, trying out different tones and styles of speaking. I even recorded myself to compare my pronunciation with native speakers. And as a result, people started telling me, "Jacob, your English sounds natural." I also listened to different accents, British, American, Australian, and even Irish and South African, to grasp the subtle nuances in pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation. I practiced identifying regional differences in vocabulary and expressions, which helped me become more adaptable in conversations. The more I immersed myself in these different styles of English, the more confident I became in my ability to understand and communicate with speakers from diverse backgrounds. But learning alone can be lonely. So, I found people who wanted to learn with me. We practiced together, corrected each other's mistakes, and kept each other motivated. We engaged in role-playing exercises, simulated real-life conversations, and even held debates to challenge each other's thinking in English. I also joined online communities where I could talk to native speakers, engage in live discussions, and participate in virtual language meetups. The first time I had a full conversation in English with a native speaker, I was nervous. My voice trembled, and I struggled to find the right words. But they understood me. That gave me the confidence to keep going. Over time, these interactions became second nature, and I found myself speaking more fluently and effortlessly than I had ever imagined. I participated in language exchange programs, where I helped others learn my native language in exchange for practicing English. These interactions not only improved my speaking skills but also exposed me to different cultures, expressions, and dialects. Through these conversations, I discovered the nuances of informal speech, slang, and regional idioms that I wouldn't have learned in a classroom. I also developed active listening skills, as I had to focus on understanding different accents and speech patterns. I learned how to adapt my language depending on my conversation partner, which strengthened my ability to think on my feet. Additionally, I formed meaningful friendships with people from different backgrounds, which made learning English feel more personal and enjoyable. It was a win-win situation, fostering deeper connections and helping me refine my conversational skills in a way that traditional learning never could. Over time, I even started leading discussion groups and helping others feel more comfortable speaking English, reinforcing my own skills in the process. Then, one day, something remarkable happened. I was walking home reflecting on my day, and suddenly I noticed I was thinking in English. Not translating. Just thinking, effortlessly and fluidly. That was the moment I knew I had truly internalized the language. It was no longer something foreign to me, no longer a set of rules I had to consciously apply. It had become instinctive, an integral part of my thoughts, my identity, my way of seeing the world. Thinking in English meant that I could respond faster in conversations. I no longer had to pause and structure my sentences in my head. Words flowed naturally, effortlessly intertwining with my thoughts. I could participate in debates, tell stories, and even joke around without second-guessing myself. It felt as though a door had opened to an entirely new world, one where I could express myself freely, without hesitation. This was the ultimate milestone in my journey, a transformation that made English not just a language I had learned, but a language I lived, breathed, and fully embraced as part of my identity. Looking back, my journey wasn't easy. There were moments of self-doubt, times when I questioned whether I would ever truly master the language. There were days when I felt frustrated, overwhelmed by complex grammar rules, and embarrassed by my mispronunciations. But every mistake, every awkward conversation, every late-night reading session, and every moment of persistence brought me closer to where I am today. Each challenge I faced became a stepping stone, turning obstacles into opportunities for growth. And now I want to ask you, what's stopping you? If a small-town boy who once feared English could do it, so can you. Start today. Listen to conversations, absorb new words, and embrace the rhythm of the language. Speak, even if you fumble at first. Every mistake is a lesson. Read everything you can, from books to online articles, and expand your understanding. Write your thoughts, practice expressing yourself, and let the language flow naturally. Immerse yourself in English. Make it a part of your daily life. Mistakes will happen, but they are stepping stones to fluency. Learn from them, push forward, and never stop growing. One day, you'll wake up and realize, you're not just thinking in English, but dreaming in it, feeling emotions through it, and expressing yourself effortlessly. And that's when you'll know, you haven't just learned English, you've truly become a part of it. If you enjoyed my story and want more tips on learning English, let's keep this conversation going. Drop a comment, share your story, and let's inspire each other. Remember, every expert was once a beginner. Keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, enjoy the journey. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Sharing this video with others will help spread motivation and useful language learning tips. Let's build a community of passionate learners and take our English skills to a professional level together.